The tremor started subtle, a deep rumble that vibrated through the old floorboards of my cabin, rattling the antique teacups on the mantel. I dismissed it as a distant thunderstorm at first, but then a searing flash of emerald green lit up the night sky, turning the forest outside into a ghostly negative image. A high-pitched whistle followed, growing in intensity until it felt like it was tearing at my eardrums. Then came the thud. Not an explosion, not a crash, but a sickeningly heavy impact that shook the very foundations of the earth. I stumbled out onto the porch, flashlight beam cutting through the inky blackness. A faint, acrid smell hung in the air, something ozone-like. The forest was silent, unnervingly so. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just that lingering scent. I knew, with a primal certainty, that something had fallen, something immense, and it was close. The next morning, the news channels were abuzz with speculation. A meteor, they said, had impacted somewhere in the vast wilderness of the northern Cascades. They were calling it a minor event, no cause for alarm, just a spectacular light show for those lucky enough to witness it. But the tremor hadn't felt minor, and the silence after the impact had been anything but reassuring. I decided to hike out, armed with my usual gear and a knot of unease in my stomach. I'd lived in these woods my whole life, knew every deer trail and every gnarled cedar. It took me hours, pushing through dense undergrowth and navigating fallen logs, before I found it. It wasn't a crater, not really. More like a massive divot in the earth, as if a giant fist had slammed into the forest floor. In the center lay the meteor, glowing with a faint, otherworldly luminescence. It was obsidian black, veined with pulsing lines of the same emerald green I'd seen in the sky. It hummed, a low, resonant thrum that I could feel in my bones. And then I saw the bear. It was a grizzly, massive even by local standards, lying unnaturally still near the meteor. I thought it was dead, perhaps caught in the impact. But then, it stirred. Its eyes, normally a dark, intelligent brown, were now wide, glazed, and that same eerie green light flickered within their depths. A low growl rumbled in its chest, a sound that was somehow wrong, and distorted. As I watched, horrified, the bear began to eat the meteor. It tore off chunks of the glowing rock with its teeth, gnawing with a disturbing intensity. Each bite seemed to energize it, its movements becoming more jerky, more violent. Its fur began to ripple, almost like static electricity, and patches of it took on a strange, iridescent sheen. The growl deepened, becoming a guttural roar that echoed through the trees. I backed away slowly, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't natural. This was something else entirely. The bear, or whatever it was becoming, seemed to sense my presence. Its head snapped up, those glowing green eyes fixing on me with an unsettling hunger. It shambled to its feet, no longer a lumbering beast but a creature of twisted sinew and unnatural power. It was larger, somehow, and its silhouette shimmered against the backdrop of the trees. A high-pitched chittering sound, entirely unbear-like, emanated from its maw, and then it charged. I ran like I had never run before, crashing through the undergrowth. The chilling chittering and the ground-shaking thud of its paws pounding behind me. I didn't look back. I just ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed, not stopping until I burst out of the tree line and onto the familiar gravel road leading back to town. I burst into the sheriff's office, gasping for air, my story tumbling out in a frantic, incoherent rush. Sheriff Brody, a man who'd seen everything the mountains had to offer, listened patiently, his face a mask of skepticism. A glowing rock, Sarah? And a bear eating it? Sounds like too many late nights with those sci-fi flicks. He chuckled, but his eyes held a flicker of concern. You all right, kiddo? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse than a ghost, Sheriff, I choked out. It wasn't just a bear, it was mutated, and it was hungry. He sent a couple of deputies out to investigate, more to humor me than anything else, I think. They came back within the hour, pale and shaken. They hadn't seen the meteor, but they had heard the roar. And they had seen the claw marks, deep gouges in the bark of ancient trees, far larger than any bear could make. And the smell. They described it as sickeningly sweet, like burnt sugar and something rotten. The town, usually so peaceful, began to stir with an uneasy buzz. Rumors spread like wildfire. A lost hiker, then two, then a whole family of campers vanished without a trace. The disappearances were attributed to rogue grizzlies, to missteps in the treacherous terrain. But I knew what was out there. Then came the screams. They started just after dusk, a single, piercing cry from the edge of town. Followed by another, and another, until the night was filled with a chorus of terror. I grabbed my hunting rifle, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold it steady. My neighbor, old Mr. Wesson, was shouting from his porch, "It's in the orchards." Something big! I saw it then, silhouetted against the dim glow of the streetlights. It was the bear, but horribly transformed. It stood on its hind legs, towering over the apple trees, its form grotesquely distended, its fur matted and shimmering with that unholy green light. Its head was too large for its body, its jaws agape, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth that seemed to shift and lengthen in the moonlight. Its paws were now massive, clawed monstrosities, tearing at the air. The chittering sound was constant now, an unnerving counterpoint to the screams. It moved with unnatural speed, a blur of shadow and distorted muscle, crashing through fences, snapping trees like twigs. The screams intensified as it bore down on a small group of people fleeing down the street. I watched in horror as it swiped, a sound like rending cloth, and then, nothing. Just the chilling silence that followed the abomination's passage. Panic erupted. The town was a hive of fear, people scrambling to secure their homes, boarding up windows, barricading doors. Sheriff Brody, his face etched with grim realization, was organizing what little defense he could muster. We were a small logging town, not equipped for this. I helped load people into the old community hall, a brick building with reinforced doors, hoping it would offer some protection. We piled furniture against the entrances, leaving only a single, heavily guarded door for entry. The air inside was thick with the scent of fear and sweat. Children whimpered, adults whispered prayers, and the constant thrumming growl from outside reverberated through the very walls. "We just need to hold out until morning," Sheriff Brody said, his voice strained. "Help's coming. State Police, National Guard, they'll be here." But I looked into his eyes and saw the doubt. We all did. The first attack on the hall was a test. A monstrous roar, closer this time, rattled the windows. Then a sickening crunch as something massive slammed into the main doors. The barricades groaned under the impact. Splinters flew. We held our breath, clutching whatever makeshift weapons we had. The creature outside seemed to be testing the perimeter, its chittering growing louder, more frantic. It circled, its heavy thuds echoing around the building. We could hear it scraping against the walls, its claws leaving deep furrows in the brick. Then, the pounding began again, this time focused on a single section of the wall, near the back entrance. It was systematic, relentless. Each blow sent tremors through the building, a primal drumming against our last refuge. Suddenly, a section of the brick wall buckled inward with a terrifying crack. Dust and debris rained down. A gaping hole appeared, revealing the nightmare outside. The bear, now even more grotesque, its skin stretched taut over bulging muscles, its eyes blazing with malevolent green light. It was no longer just a bear, it was an engine of destruction, a living embodiment of alien hunger. It squeezed through the opening, its enormous head appearing first, then its impossibly broad shoulders, its body rippling with unnatural strength. The air filled with the stench of something foul, a combination of decaying meat and that metallic ozone smell from the meteor. People screamed, scattering like frightened mice. The creature didn't hesitate. It moved with a horrifying fluidity, swiping at anyone in its path. Its claws were like razors, tearing through flesh and bone with sickening ease. The screams turned into gurgles, then silence. It was a nightmare in motion, a whirlwind of death. I saw it grab Mrs. Peterson, the gentle old librarian, lifting her effortlessly into the air before she was gone. I averted my eyes, bile rising in my throat. Sheriff Brody, bless his brave soul, opened fire with his shotgun, the blasts echoing impotently against the creature's hide. The bullets seemed to simply flatten against its skin, leaving only faint scorch marks. The bear turned its head, its glowing eyes locking onto the sheriff, and then, with a single, swift movement, it was on him. I didn't wait, I couldn't. I scrambled over upturned chairs, pushing through the terrified crowd, my mind screaming one word: escape. I found a small utility door in the kitchen, half hidden by stacked crates. It was locked from the inside, a flimsy bolt. With desperate strength, I fumbled with it, my fingers slick with sweat. Behind me, the sounds of carnage continued. The snarls, the chittering, the sickening wet sounds of the bear feasting. The air was thick with the coppery tang of blood. I pulled the door open, slipping out into the chaotic darkness of the night. I ran blindly, the sounds of the massacre fading behind me, replaced by the pounding of my own heart in my ears. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. The town was lost. My home was lost. Everyone I knew was gone. I found myself back on the old logging trails, the ones I knew so well. The moon, a sliver of white, cast long, distorted shadows through the trees. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of terror through me. I imagined those glowing green eyes behind every tree, that hideous chittering just behind my ear. I kept moving, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate, primal need to survive. I don't know how long I walked, or how far. Hours, maybe. The night was endless. As dawn began to paint the sky with bruised purples and grays, I stumbled onto the highway. A deserted highway, stretching into the distance. No cars, no sign of life. Just the silent, empty asphalt. I collapsed on the shoulder, my body racked with tremors, my mind a jumble of unspeakable horrors. The image of the creature, its glowing eyes, its impossible strength, the way it had devoured everything in its path. It was burned into my memory. I am a survivor. But what kind of survival is this? I am alone, surrounded by the ghosts of a town that no longer exists, haunted by the echoing screams of those I couldn't save. The world has changed. The meteor brought something to our quiet little corner of the earth, something that turned a wild beast into an alien abomination. And it is out there, in the vast, dark woods, waiting. And I am just one small, insignificant human, the last witness to the day the stars decided to eat our town. I know they'll send search parties eventually. They'll find the devastation. They'll find the remnants. But they won't understand. They won't believe. And I don't know if I can ever tell them the truth, the terrifying, impossible truth, about the meteor, the bear, and the horror that now stalks the wilderness.
play dead and I stay dead. Sick of being the